our accounts payable person said, that doesn't feel like it delivers marketing joy. And I was like, okay, all right. The team gets it because I've been saying it for so long, and I'm like, okay, we're on the right tracks. Hey there, and welcome to a brand new episode of Delivering Marketing Joy. I am your host, Kirby Hassman. Joining me today is a brand new rock star. I'm super excited to dive into the topics today. She's a writer, a content strategist, and the owner and CEO of Every Little Word, Kristen Sweeney. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Kirby. I'm very happy to be here.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm really excited about this because I've heard you talk about the power of brand storytelling in the past. What do you think most companies get wrong when they try to tell their brand story?
So I think a few different things, kind of depending where a company is in their sort of maturity or sophistication. Obviously, kind of the easiest one is that they don't necessarily have a brand story. They have a logo and a website, right? And they don't have kind of guidelines or anything that's really kind of shaping their identity beyond a little bit of visual support. But kind of going beyond that, I think one of the things I see is like kind of chasing competitors, right? So rather than really sort of looking inward and saying, how can we tell the story of ourselves and reflect what we are doing and reflect that outward, they sort of look outward first. And obviously, understanding your competitors is important. It has a place, but if you're trying to copy someone else, you're inherent in that is you're never going to be as necessarily as good at it as they are. Not to mention the really important idea that you don't always know from the outside what's actually working for a company internally.
Yeah.
Really important to think about. And then the last thing I think, and this I see honestly from smaller organizations all the way up through enterprise companies, is they are too corporate, a little too buttoned up. They don't let some of the sort of individual perspectives come through. So it is important to have a kind of a unified narrative, but if nobody's ever saying anything beyond the key talking points, that starts to get pretty boring pretty quickly. And I've seen it with small companies where a founder will say, "Oh no, I don't want it to be about me. I'm afraid we'll look too small." Really kind of interesting in this age where founder-led marketing is becoming so prominent. But then, of course, as you go, bigger companies as well are worried, right? They have a lot of risk and they want to be really buttoned up. So I think that not finding ways to let sort of some of the humanity kind of shine through.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just having a conversation about the idea of doing the foundational work, even on your personal branding, of actually knowing who you are is like not something people talk about. And I think that's kind of, it relates to what you're talking about. It's like, as an organization, you got to know who you are and have an actual story to tell. And so I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and maybe this is a part of this, but how do you help brands go beyond just what they do? Because I think a lot of us is like, that's the question that we answer all the time. What do we do? But we want to clarify why it matters, right, to the audience.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the most cynical way of looking at this might be to just kind of say, like, nobody cares. Nobody cares unless you make them care, unless they have a reason to care. This idea of like, what's in it for me? So most simply, I think this reflects back to really connecting what you do to the customer experience and what kind of value are you providing in their world. But for me, it's a little bit beyond that. It's really about empathy, like understanding we create content, right? And so even understanding the idea, and I'll talk about this with my team, like when we are sending an approval and we're sending it and we're thinking, okay, you're showing up in the client's inbox, and think about all the other emails in their inbox and think about their day. And if we don't make it so easy for them to know what they need to do, know when they need to do it, click through and get to what they need, like all those little steps along the way to reduce friction really come from a place of empathy and understanding how busy for, everyone is on the other end, but also what their pains are, what they're really looking to achieve. Um, and that you create that kind of messaging by really talking with people who are close to it. So that's obviously customers themselves, really important. And then also, I think the folks in your organization who are close to those customer pains, they're often excellent proxies, if you find the right people. And a lot of the content we end up creating is, we call it expert led content, where we're working directly with subject matter experts or folks who are kind of on the front lines there, delivering to clients day after day, and really have the ability to sort of understand, like, what are their circumstances, so that when you're making the why should I care, it really is connected, to the folks on the other side.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, and you kind of talked about this when you talk to your team, right? You're saying this, but how do you, and I envision this for large organizations, but I would guess this is small organizations too. How do you get internal teams aligned behind a brand message, especially when people are kind of chasing their own different goals?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm really a firm believer in is that overarching messaging is not a marketing function. It's not a content function. It's an executive level, leadership level function with that kind of buy-in. I've definitely been on the end of content assets where we're trying to create a single piece of content and we get those comment wars, and it turns out that the company is not agreed on what their stance is on a particular issue, and a blog post or a byline is the worst possible place to try and hash that out. It's really inefficient, right? But it can be the signal that something further upstream, um, is not aligned or is missing. It sounds trite, but honestly, one of the best things is not only so working at that leadership level, making sure you're communicating it early and often. Um, it can be an important part of the hiring process, things like core values, when somebody is actually onboarded and trained, reviewed every quarter, um, you know, consistently reinforced and documented, and using that document and referring back to it. So what are our brand guidelines? What are our core values? If you've got more than two people in an organization, you've got room for interpretation.
Right.
So really having something that is unifying, that is that source of truth for these kind of core messages, can be really important.
Yeah, and I think that one of the mistakes I see in leadership, and I don't know, push back if you disagree, but it's like I think that sometimes leaders, they put together this, they take their time, and then they roll it out, and then they feel like their job is done. And it's just continuing that I see. It's like you just got to say it over and over and over again until it starts being repeated back to you on a regular basis. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, I think about my father. He, for years, was VP of operations, and he worked in a regional health system, in the Tampa Bay area where I live. And their goal, and he certainly could do it, was that every employee could spout off their core values quickly, and they understood them and they knew what they were. And they, at least in his time, really achieved that goal. But they had to work at it a lot.
Yeah,
It was a hugely important initiative. And I think that's where we think about content and communications as something that, especially in smaller companies, that focus tends to be external first. There's not a lot of budget maybe to begin with, and definitely not a lot of budget for internal, but internal comms are so important as well for that reason. And it does need a strategy, and it does need the same kind of consistency, because effectively you are marketing to employees.
exactly. Exactly. I always joke. So our tagline is delivering marketing joy. It makes sense, right? But I remember when I was like, okay, we got it. When my team used it back against me. And I mean it it was a great thing because I was suggesting we should do something for a client that I was probably making a short-term money decision. And
Mhm.
our accounts payable person said, that doesn't feel like it delivers marketing joy. And I was like, okay, all right. The team gets it because I've been saying it for so long, and I'm like, okay, we're on the right track. So, okay. Final question for you, Kristen. What's one marketing trend? And this is just interesting to me. I think it's a fun question. What's one marketing trend you think is getting too much hype, and maybe one that's not getting enough attention?
So I'm going to be kind of boring and I'm going to say it's AI for both.
Okay. Okay.
AI for both. So I think I personally am kind of sick to death of hearing you won't be replaced by AI. You'll be replaced by somebody who is using AI. Like, cool. I got it. I think it's both, it's overdone. And it's not specific enough. There's so much, I think, take a scroll on LinkedIn, so much kind of vague talk, vague terms about AI and what it's doing. And this is something I've noticed consistently because we work with a lot of clients where we're creating very complex content. They're very sophisticated companies talking to very sophisticated audiences. And sometimes what they're talking about can become quite jargony. When I always find that the value is getting into the specifics, and sometimes you're getting into the specifics and they're not that glamorous. So, for example, to say, oh yes, we're using AI, and a really cool use case is that we're recording this conversation. It will generate a transcript for us. Like, that's super valuable and also kind of boring, right?
Yeah. Right.
Better to just talk about it as being transformative and not really say why. So for me, that piece is definitely on the overhyped side. I was also recently, I had the privilege of interviewing a professor from MIT, and he took a moment he was like, I'm just going to get up on a little soapbox. We've had AI for an awfully long time, and so the kind of just the hype around it is starting to feel like it's reaching a fever pitch. Um, and at the same time, the on the side of the trend not quite getting enough attention, I would say AI because in so many cases, the current workforce, those of us who are out there using it now, the approach really seems to be, you use it, it makes some mistakes, it gets you a good portion of the way there, maybe 80% for certain things, maybe 90% or more. But then you have to apply your critical thinking and your inputs and your editing and your skills. And I think what I'm not hearing enough conversation about is what happens when the people who are coming up in the workforce don't have those years of experience to know what good looks like or to provide the right inputs or to develop the critical thinking skills, not because they're not capable, but because they haven't really been honed or trained to do that.
Yeah.
They've kind of easy button. So in that way, I have some philosophical angst about
Yeah.
where it's heading. And, it's something I talk about with my team. And we're always kind of evaluating what is our philosophy? What's the best way to use these tools? How do we want to be using these tools in a way that still makes sure our jobs actually feel fulfilling? So that'd be my answer.
That's really good stuff. Kristen, this has been really fun. Where can folks find more information about you?
You can absolutely check me out on LinkedIn, or our website is everylittleword.co.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been really fun today, Kristen. We'll have to do it again sometime, okay?
Absolutely. Would love to. Thank you,
All
Kirby.
right. That's going to wrap up this edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We'll see you next time.